Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, the Linux Lighthouse. Hold on, you will definitely want to watch this one until the end, because I think you are really going to enjoy it. As most of you know, this channel is all about Linux, its features, tools, capabilities, ins and outs, details, power and flexibility, and everything in the Unix world. But today I had to make an exception and share something that's caught my eye. It's a tool I think every Linux sysadmin should know about. If you are like me, a sysadmin who knows a bit of Python, maybe even advanced Python, and you have always wanted to build a web app but don't want to dive into HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, this is going to be right up your alley. Or maybe you have tried using front-end frameworks like Vue or React and then ended up having to deal with a backend, so you got stuck in the whole JavaScript full-stack rabbit hole. Let's face it, it can be overwhelming. But what if I told you there is a way to build beautiful full-stack web apps using almost only Python? Sounds like a dream, right? Let me introduce you to Reflex. It's honestly like magic for us Python fans. Today I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know about it. Here is a bit of backstory. Reflex was originally called Pynecone. It was first released in December 2022 by a small passionate team of Python developers who wanted to make web development as Pythonic as possible. And honestly, they are crushing it. So what is Reflex exactly? Well, it's a modern open source framework that lets you build full stack web apps in pure Python. No more wrangling with JavaScript if you don't want to. It is the missing puzzle piece for Python developers and sysadmins who want to create interactive websites or web apps without switching to a completely new stack. Let's get real here. Reflex is not just some new tool to play around with. It's a full-fledged framework. It takes your Python code and turns it into a modern web app using Next.js for the front end and Fast API for the back end. You get to write almost everything in Python, and Reflex handles compiling the front end, setting up real-time updates, and managing the server. In short, it's a dream for anyone who loves Python. Alright, enough talk. Let's roll up our sleeves and get hands-on with this amazing new technology. Let's see how Reflex really works in practice. I have been playing around with Reflex to build a real-time system monitoring dashboard, something that shows my CPU, memory, and disk usage live, right as it's happening. It's fast, it is clean, and honestly, it took me way less time than trying to wrangle all those complicated JavaScript stacks. No headaches. Check this out. Here is a quick look at it running. No refresh button, no weird tricks. It just updates automatically. Reflex takes care of it. Oh, and by the way, I am now officially affiliated with Reflex. So if you want to give it a spin, check out the link in the description and use my promo code, the Linux Lighthouse. It supports the channel and gets you a little bonus too. Before we jump in any further, there is one piece of advice I want to share. If you are planning to start your journey with Reflex, make sure you have a good understanding of Python first, especially things like classes, functions, and decorators. Trust me, it will make working with Reflex so much easier and more enjoyable. When you land on the Reflex website, you will see the first section on the website is the AI prompt. From here, you can use to write your idea and the AI will generate the Reflex code for you. And then you have here three sections. The first one, if we open it again, you will see an AI prompt and then some template examples down here, and you can see there are trending, newest, and my apps if you already registered and you have a created app. If you are a paid member, you can make your app private. If you are not a paid member, your app will be public. Okay, and anything here in the public template on Reflex, you can download and you can use it as a start point for your coming project. Okay. And we can see here the second section is for the document. And my advice, make the document is your best friend. And as you can see here, the first section, onboarding, for introduction, installation, basic knowledge, even they have some examples. If you follow, you will have a good idea about how using Reflex and how it works. Also, they have a project structure. Everything you might need to understand, everything, you will find it here in the official document. Also, they have some examples here as a tutorial. You can follow step by step to give yourself a full understanding about what is going on. And then the second section, user interface, everything related to the front end, you will find it here. From the components, how pages work, styling, assets, everything. And then you have the section for state, which related to the back end. Okay. And the last section here, if you are a registered, you will have a page like that. You can host and deploy your app, or you can use the AI to build your app and directly to be hosted on Reflex server. Okay guys, let's open Reflex official documentation. And as I mentioned before, the official documentation is sectioned to three main sections. The onboarding, or as introduction, to give you a proper understanding about Reflex, how to install it, some basics, the project structure, and two tutorials to follow, and then the section that related to the front end. Here it is user interface. Everything related to the front end you might need, you will find it here. And we have the last section, which called state, related to backend. Everything related to the backend, you will find it here. There is one thing I would like to highlight and start with before showing our example for this video. And in my opinion, that thing, you should know about it at the beginning to make you full understanding about Reflex and how the components connected to each other. So when you open styling, so if you have proper understanding, basic knowledge about HTML, CSS, it will help you, because you understand at the end, any framework will translate your code to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in behind the scene. Okay, so knowing some knowledge about these components will give you a proper understanding about what I'm going to say now. So when you go to this Tailwind, as you know, Tailwind is a CSS library, okay, to give a styling, coloring to your HTML document. So when you go all the way down in that page, you will see something really interesting here, that's talking about two things: Reflex core components and Reflex low level component. And when they talk about Reflex core components, that they are built on Radix themes. So this is Radix UI, user interface website, that Reflex components build on it. And when you go to the documentation, it will give you a proper understanding about what we care here about Radix is the props that we might use. And you can see here that Reflex is using the same names that Radix use. Like here, box, you will see in Reflex, reflex.box, and so on. Okay. And like here, flex, grid, container, section, text, heading, all these components from Radix, it is wrapped magically by a Reflex team to make you able to write the code in pure Python. So let's go back to the manual or the documentation to continue explaining about that. So what is the difference between Reflex core components and Reflex low-level components? The major difference between these two, that Reflex core components comes predefined with props. Props like, for an example, padding, margin, width, height, color, class name, all these props. But the low level, it gives you a raw components with no styling at all, to give you the chance to bring your own styling or your own CSS library to use it with these components. And as we will see later, that how the core components looks like and how the low-level components looks like. Okay, so I wanted to highlight this feature to make you understand about these two things in Reflex. One more thing to add here, my advice also, that you should check this website css-tricks.com/guides and try to familiarize yourself with CSS Flexbox layout guide and the CSS grid layout. It will help you a lot when you start using Reflex to understand these two kind of layout in CSS. Also, if you would like to familiarize yourself with the rest of CSS concept, also it will help you understanding when you start designing your coming project using core components or low-level components. Now, the reason why I spoke about these things at the beginning, because you have to understand that core components, as we said, that they are built on Radix user interface, and Radix user interface, they have their own styling. So if you are going to bring your own styling or your own CSS library and you want to style your app, use low-level components. Don't try to style the core components with different CSS styling. Like using core components, which already predefined with Radix props styling, it will make some kind of conflict and strange behavior. So going with core components and styling it, use the default styling or anything that Radix supports for styling, because this is what the front end of Reflex using or the core components built on. But if you are going to use a different styling, use the low-level components, which comes with no styling, to give you the chance to do that. Reflex is full of features, and there is one feature I would like to highlight before moving forward. When you go to the section related to user interface or the front end, you will see here something interesting, wrapping React. When you go to this and you start reading that, you will find out that you are able to wrap React library. But you have a condition here. So when you go down here, you will find some explanation, examples, and how to wrap a React library. But here you need to read this. What not to wrap. And Reflex team highlighting that there are some libraries on NPM that don't expose React components and therefore are very hard to wrap with Reflex. So you have to follow the guideline that they give you on how to wrap a React library. And if you are interested about this section, leave a comment below and I will try to make a video specifically for this part of Reflex. But mostly if you go with the official document, you will find everything you might need on how to wrap a React library and using it in your web app or Reflex project. And it gives you everything, that how you load how to wrap it, what or the props to use, and custom code and hooks, everything. But anyway, if you're still interested about this section and you want a deep understanding about it, leave a comment below and I will try to make a video about this section in particular. So why I spoke about these things at the beginning, because these things or these features, core components and low-level components, it will help you understand the layout when it comes to the layout, how you are going to lay out your web app, the pages. Your project will contain pages that will be loaded on the browser, right? So when you go here in the layout, you will see they are using the same names like Radix, box, stack, flex, grid, as I showed you earlier on Radix website. Okay, so to understand what the meaning of the layout, as I said, if you have a proper understanding, basic understanding of HTML, let's see this screenshot example like here. Layout, the HTML, the web page that will be loaded. This is the simplest one. It will just print hello world in the middle of the screen. Okay, and we have inline styling, title, head. Okay, so these parameters in the head, Reflex components, they have it. So you can load your metadata by using the core components, okay? Or you can load it by using the low-level components also. So now we have body, or the thing that will be contained inside the body. They are the thing that we will see on the web page when it's loaded, okay? So how to lay out? The layout comes or can be done by core components or low-level components. You can start your page with a box or V-stack for vertical stack, or if there is a section in the web page you want to show something, you can use H-stack, which stands for horizontal stack. Okay, and I will show you the things now. So let me open the whiteboard to make it more easier. And I divided to two columns here, Reflex core component and Reflex low-level components. So we spoke about the layout. So as I saw you earlier here, like all these things, the head metadata, okay, you can use the components comes with Reflex to load the metadata, which are the thing that will be loaded in the web page, but no one seeing it. We are talking about this section, the body, where your design will be seen on the page when it will load. Reflex core components. The major components here, or when you are a beginner or you start building a simple web apps, these are the most used components. The Rx, what is Rx? Because usually we do import, okay, Reflex as Rx. So it is a convention to use Rx. And so Reflex.box, this component is built on Radix user interface. So it is just a box, and this box comes with 0 predefined props. No predefined or loaded props on that box. It left to you to add the parameters that you want for that component. The Reflex V-stack or vertical stack, it looks like that. Vertical stack, like I want my page to be contained inside a vertical stack. So what the vertical stack do? The first element will be here. When you write a second line of code, it will be inserted here when you start writing inside a V-stack, and so on. So the direction will be like that. Okay. So what is the Reflex H stack is for horizontal stack. Horizontal stack is like that. So when you start writing inside horizontal stack, your data will start be inserted like that. And these two comes predefined by a default props. So if you need to change them, you have the keywords to change these props for VStack, like for the width, the height, and so on. Okay, so the direction is from left to right when you start adding your data inside the stack. Okay. So what is container? Reflex container. Container is almost like a box, but it comes with a predefined props for padding and margin on all sides. The 4 sides comes predefined with padding and margin. If you want something to be contained and quickly to have its own styling with padding and margin, you use container. And mostly container will be used for something you want to show it centered on your page. And image from its name when you want to load an image on your web page. So now we come to the low-level components. As we said before, they come raw, no styling at all. So you can bring your own styling, Tailwind CSS or whatever. So as I said before, if you have a basic understanding of HTML, you will have no issue at all when it comes to low-level components. The only thing that I want you to realize here after some time of using Reflex, you might forget. See, the core components, it's written like that, rx dot and the component name. But here, rxel, don't forget .el. It distinguish the low-level components from the core components. So Reflex element dev, Reflex element paragraph, Reflex element header 1, and so on. Yeah, they have h2 and so on. All the default HTML elements, you can use it here directly using Reflex. And you can add your own styling by using the keywords that Reflex provide for you. And you can load your own styling if it is Tailwind or, for an example, Daisy UI, Daisy User Interface, which built on Tailwind CSS. The other thing I want to highlight here, that understand that, as I said, the core components, they come predefined, loaded with Radix UI styling. Okay? User interface, Radix user interface. So these components already pre-styled or predefined or loaded with the predefined props using the Radix styling, or the low-level components comes with nothing. So if you are using Tailwind here, don't try to use Tailwind and you add Tailwind styling to the core components, because it will do some kind of conflict and you will see a strange behavior on your website. And as I show you earlier here in the document, when you go to Tailwind and you go down, all the way down here, that's what they are talking about. Okay. So here Reflex core components are built, which means they come with predefined styling. When you apply Tailwind classes to these components, you may encounter styling conflicts or unexpected behavior. So follow the official document always to not face any strange behavior. But here, for the best experience when using Tailwind CSS in your Reflex application, we recommend, it's a recommendation by Reflex team, using low-level components, Reflex.el, or stands for Reflex elements. Okay, so you might ask, can I mix using core components with low-level components? Yes, mixing them is okay. We are talking about the styling. If you are going to use Tailwind styling, you use it with the low-level components. Don't bring any styling here to the core components. Core components only accept Radix styling. Okay, so you can do something like that, box, and you start writing rx.elements.dev, and you open and you start writing and you close. So this can be done. Also, this can be done. EL, according to your needs. This is from where the name comes from or came from, Reflex. The flexibility that you can combine things to get what you need or what you want for your web app. So you can write something like that, and here box, and you start writing your elements, and don't forget to close the brackets. That so when it comes to the styling, for this styling comes the last element. Like if I would write something like rx.box, okay, and I start writing, if you are writing like more than one element, like Reflex text, Reflex image, so don't forget the comma. They are like a set or a list, okay? So the styling for Rx box will come at the end, before the closing brackets of the box. So now, after all explanation, I hope you understood this section before, because it will make your life easier when you start working with Reflex to understand these things before even start reading the official manual from the beginning. It will make you understand, because you will start seeing this. What is this? What is this? It is just a container to style or how your data will be laid out on your page. Okay, one more thing. If you are going to style a template as a start point for all your web app, okay, you can start using low-level components. And if you are going with a low-level components and you brought your own styling, my advice, go all the way with the low-level components and make mixing at minimum. And if you are going core components, okay, try to make it minimum using low-level components to make your code readable and less confusing. But sometimes you are using a core components and you stuck because you want a specific styling. So then you can start using the low-level components to get the result that you are looking for. Okay, so keep in mind that box comes with no predefined or no preloaded parameters for the props that the box contain. Box give you the chance, if you want to bring your own styling following Radix user interface, like the width, height, color, background color, font, all these things. But VStack, HStack, container, everything else comes preloaded with the default variables or default parameters. So you need to change accordingly to your needs. So now with this, let's move forward and show our example for this video, which we are going to create a dashboard showing our memory, CPU, disk usage, and update the information without auto reload. Reflex documentation has a section on installation, how to install a Python virtual environment, and how to install Reflex on Windows or Mac OS Linux. In our case, I'm using Linux, so I will be going with the Linux installation. So you are free to go and read these steps based on your OS operating system. Everything you might need, you will find in the documents. Okay. So let's minimize this and open our terminal. And here I have a workspace folder, and I created specifically for our project a folder called Reflex.dev. So first thing to do is to create a virtual environment, a Python virtual environment. So we run python -m VM, and I will name it Reflex-imp. After that, let's sourcing it first. Reflex pin activate. Let's clear the screen and let's create a directory for our coming project, which is dashboard. And let's change directory to this board. So now we are inside the directory dashboard. Something about Reflex. If the folder or the directory that you will use to create your project, your Reflex project, if it contains dashes, like for an example, dashboard, Reflex will change this dash to underscore and try to avoid naming by have a space. It will cause some strange behavior. So keep it simple as possible. Okay. So now the second step is to install Reflex and some other Python modules that we will use for our project. So we use the command pip and we install Reflex psutils and distro. It is psutil. Okay, and we press enter and let's the installation finish. If you saw this message here, just update the pip command by running that. Now we can use pip list to see the packages installed. and we will see Reflex here is installed, and ps util and distro, and all the needed packages by Reflex. Okay, so now we have Reflex installed, and we sourced the virtual environment we created, and we are inside the directory that we want to create our Reflex project. All you need to do is Reflex init. Yes, it is that simple. And we press enter. And now don't bother about the messages that you will see, because at the time of recording this video, the version of Reflex is 0.7.14. So here it is just an information message about that something will be deprecated in that version. We are not using that version, because if we go up, we will see here Reflex. Okay, let's finish here and I will show you that we are using Reflex 7.14. So now to initialize the project or our directory, we have three choices. The first one is a blank Reflex app. The second one, try our free AI builder. If we choose one, it will directly open our web browser and take us to Reflex AI. Or pre-made templates built by the Reflex team. Also, this one will open a browser to give you the chance to choose one of the templates that Reflex website has, as I showed you before. So we will go with the blank, and we just need to hit enter. Now our project is created. So first, let's show that we are using Reflex 07.14. This is the latest Reflex version. Now let's see the directory structure. We can run the command tree, and we will see that our app, our files, named according to the folder that we created. So whatever your web app name will be, you create a directory with that name and you change to it. And after that, you run Reflex init, and Reflex will create the needed files inside that directory. So here, assets, you can guess what is assets because it contains the favorite icon that will show on the tab on the browser. So here you can place your CSS, JavaScript, or any images, any kind of assets that you will use while creating your app. The dashboard, this one is the main directory in our app, in Reflex directory. And this one is the starting point of your app. So when you run the command reflex run, this is the file that Reflex will look at. You can consider it as like index.html in other JavaScript frameworks. So this will be your start point. Okay. And here we have pre-created requirements. If you have other modules or packages, you need these to be installed when you give your project to another team to work on. So we can check that file. We will see that it contains Reflex. Okay. And also as a reminder that when you start creating your app, you are using Reflex with this version. And we have our xconfig file. This file is very important when you start deploying your app online or hosting your app, like for an example, on Reflex. And we can see the file here, Reflex, and this is what Reflex config file, the default preloaded with these, the app name and plugins. It's by default loading Tailwind plugin to your app by default. Okay, to save you the headache of how to enable Tailwind in your app if you are going to use Tailwind when you start styling the low-level components. Okay, don't forget that. So I'm using Codium, which is an open source editor based on VS Code. without Microsoft fingerprint. So I will open Codium here, and let's bring it from the other screen. And let's open our main file to show you the structure of a default created template, blank template by Reflex. You noticed here that there is a hidden directory called .web. This directory, if I open it, it will look familiar for people who used to use JavaScript frameworks. And you will see that it a little bit looks like something familiar, Next.js. So here, this directory will be loaded by the downloaded needed packages for your project. Reflex will check your code and accordingly will start downloading the needed packages from npm for your project to save you the dealing with the JavaScript. At any time, let's say in case you by mistake you deleted this directory, don't panic, because next time you run your app, this directory will be created for you again. So anything you will do here in this directory or any parameter you will change in any of these files will be overwritten once you rerun your server again. So if you want to have some kind of parameter to be written here, even if this directory got deleted and recreated again, you check the manual, the Reflex manuals, and you will find where to have your configuration when you need this configuration to be always there in your app. And you will find that mostly it will be in Rx config. If you need something in particular, like for an example, you don't want to use Tailwind and you want to use something else. As you saw before when I opened the file, that here when you like to load a plugins, and what if these plugins has parameters to change something or a props for these plugins. So this is your place to edit. Okay, so let's do a little anatomy here for this file. As I said before, this file is your starting point for your app. The first thing is a comment, and if you are familiar with Python, this is one of the ways that you can place a comment in your file. And in our case, we will not need it, so I will delete it. And here the most important line in all files you will create using Reflex, which is import Reflex as Rx. Here you are importing the main library for the framework, which is Reflex, which contain everything that you will need from Reflex. And here, this is another import, this one, because this information here is being used here. Okay, is being used here. So we will delete it later. If you still remember what we spoke about earlier about Reflex, and Reflex handles the front end and the back end, and the front end is the user interface, okay, and the back end where your data will reside, and it can be changed over time by an event or a handler or a function that might alter your data. And these data can be saved in the memory or in a database. So let's delete this line because we are not going to use it. Okay. And we will delete the line that using that imports, because also we not use it. Okay. So I consider as Reflex try to simplify it. I think that the default template from Reflex is the simplest way to understand the structure of Reflex front end and back end, and they put both of them in one file so you can understand and wrap your head till you get familiar with Reflex, and then you will start to realize that you need to separate the front end from the back end. And because it is Python, you can put the back end like the state, like you can come here and you can change, you can create a directory, not inside the web, but in the parent, and you can create it here or in the parent directory of the project. But let's create it inside dashboard, and you can create a folder called state. Okay, and you can create another one for, let's say, pages. So we can create one for pages. This file dashboard is your entrance, your app entrance, that when you start running Reflex, your app will look at that file first. And here you are loading your routing system and your application. So let's get back to it. So as we said here, anything inside a class and inherited from Reflex.state, this the back end. And in my case, the name of the class can be anything. So I will name it monitor state and inherited, the most thing that it inherits from Reflex.state. And then the front end, where your pages will be loaded. The components, the function that will contain a component that will be rendered on the page when it's loaded. And you notice here that any function page, you can consider this type of function as your pages. So you can create a function for about, for contact us, whatever the sitemap your web app will have. And the must thing here, that this function must return a Reflex component. Okay, as you can see here, return Reflex container, and contains other components inside. And to load your app, you just create a variable here in the file, reflex.app, and then here the magic of the routing system that Reflex is using. After initializing the app, you just use the pre-built function add page and you add index. By default in Reflex, index is the index of your app, the root of your app. Here they remove it, but we can add it and it will not affect anything in our app. We can add it like that. Let's say you have another function for about. So we can do the same like this, add page, okay, and you open brackets, about, and where it will route like that, and about. And this will be a page that when you load your app and you press on a link, if it is on the main web page on the index, it will automatically routing to that path. Okay. So this function is your front end. Classes is your back end to save your data. Here front end for the changing data. Let's talk about here. So in this example, this template started using a core component. Everything is core component. You will notice that it is rx.vstack, heading, text, link, logo, and the color mode button to change from dark to light. Okay. So that's what I was talking about earlier, the design, the layout of your web app. So let's run this template, this example, by just running reflex run, and let's the app load and download the needed and JavaScript packages. So now our app is running, and you have a link for the front end and a link for the back end. Okay, any error in your code, it will be reflected here. So let's say, for an example, I will delete this and I will save. Immediately, you can see that there is a syntax error. And where is it exactly? Python blogs. Okay, so let's put it back. And Reflex has an auto reload. Once I save, compiling, everything is good. Now your app is starting again. So let's see how this one looks like. And let's go here. And this is the default. We deleted one line because we needed it. We didn't need it. And here comes out of the box that we can change the theme from light to dark, the color mode. Okay. And we can check the responsiveness. It's okay. So this is the template of Reflex. Now let's change the code to do what we want to do. Now I didn't change anything in the front end yet, but here our back end, I added 2 more imports that we will use, ps-util and distro. I loaded the backend class or the state class with some variables here. Okay, and we have one method for that class that we will use, or we call it from the front end to show the data of the variables. Okay, if you are familiar with Python, nothing strange here. Just a normal class has an inheritance from another class and loaded with some variables. Okay, and a method. The only thing here, as I told you before, that you need to have a full understanding about Python classes and functions, decorations. So the method, the class method here is decorated by Reflex.event. So any class method that is going to be called from the front end, it's called an event. Based on an event, you have to decorate it with Reflex.event. When you start working with Reflex, all these kind of things will make sense later, or if you have a basic knowledge about using frameworks, web frameworks, you will understand these kind of things and how to use it, and especially Python. So we are not using anything strange here. It is pure Python. And decorating a class method by another function, it is something completely normal in Python. So try to be good with Python classes and functions and function decorators. Okay, so any class method that will be decorated by Reflex.event, this method will be called based on an event happening on the front end. Maybe a user will click a button, or maybe based on a time. That's what we will use. Based on time, this method will be called. So the event here will be time, like after how long this method should be called. Okay. And now I changed the function or the index page or the function that will be our front end for the index, and it will render these components. So as you can see that I wrapped the page in a V stack, vertical stack. So the first component will be the button for changing the color mode. Then I'm having a heading, system monitoring dashboard, the size of the font, color scheme, green. And here, this is what I was telling you about, the props. So you can do something. If you are using VS Code, you just press on Control and the mouse will be changed to a pointer like that. You can read directly from here, or you can just press on it and it will take you from where this function coming from. And here we will see heading. It's coming from heading, and it has initialization function called create. So if I did the same to heading, and here you can see the props that this one accepting. Okay. This is a fast way if you want to wrap your head, if you have a good knowledge about Python and you want quickly to learn about the props for each component. And after that, I'm adding a text host name, and this host name using Python formatting. And here I am calling the state with the variable OS flavor, this one, and the method that will be loading it with uname node name using this module psutil. After that, I'm adding another text, Linux distribution, and here the distro name, this one, will be placed here, version, and so on. And inside a container, inside a vstack, I have CPU, okay, usage, and it will call this variable from the method CPU and memory. Okay, so how these variables get loaded with the proper data? If you notice here in the same container, Reflex has a nice function which is called moment, and it let you run something based on time. So the interval here, 2 seconds on change. So after 2 seconds, check if there is something changed in these variables. Call update metrics again. Okay. So this is the simplest way to have our dashboard up and running. So I will save the file and let's go to the web page and refresh it. Automatic refreshed. I didn't click on anything. So here the simplest look of dashboard created by Reflex. And I have a heading here and I have the host name. I know there is no styling. It is not centered or something like that. And we will notice here it has some kind of out of the box responsiveness. Okay. And it comes out of the box also that you can change dark mode to light mode. Before updating this code to make the app looks more better and appealing with styling, let's explain this again. So first you import the needed modules, the Python modules, Reflex, the most important one, and any extra modules you want to import, you import it here. And then we have a backend state class with one method to update the variables needed to be used in our front end and show on our web page. Okay. And we have the front end function index, which will return a Reflex component, and it has a core components inside. And again, when I said about laying out your page, the starting layout is the VStack. So let's say something here. Yes, you can create a file as a default layout and using the same concept of Python, and you call that function, and accordingly you start to include the components that you need to be rendered on your page. Okay, so this class state backend, we can, in this folder or directory, we can create a file and we can name it monitor_state.py, and we place this one inside the file, and then we come here and we import that file and we use it in the same way as any Python module. Okay. So now I updated the code. Here, the state class backend, we have it the same, but I added 3 methods, more methods, to do some kind of casting. Reflex is a pure Python, and as I said, under the hood, it's using Next.js for your front end. And some components has a specific capabilities. Like for an example, here I want to show a progress bar, and the value or the props for this component accept only integer. So what can I do about that? Yeah, you can use normal way of Python functions like wrap this in integer, but it will not work. Reflex will complain about it. So to go around this, you will use the decorative, because these data will be rendered in the front end. So the front end at the end is JavaScript, is Next.js. So it will not understand data coming from Python unless you wrap it in a specific way to make it understand these data. So here I created 3 methods to convert the value from float to integer. And if you notice here, it is decorated with reflex.var. Remember to check the documents, and you go in the state and check the kind of vars and the events to understand the decoration in that case. Okay, so in short, if you are going to call a function or a method from the back end in the front end, you decorate it with reflex.event. If you are going to call a data from the back end and you will use it in the front end, especially if it is a function, you have to decorate it with reflex.var. Okay? And then I created a helper function called state card. It takes label, progress value, float value, and color. And inside that function, it will contain or return. Yeah, we can add here. We forgot to add rx.components. Okay? Because this function is returning a reflex component, which is card. If you are into web development, web designing, you will understand what is a card is. And inside the card, I created another component, vstack, to lay out my data in a vertical stack. So first text will take the variable label, and then the progress takes props progress value and maximum 100, color scheme, color, and the size of the font, and then text to show the actual data. That's why here actual data, I mean the float value that this function will. If I will use the float value of the CPU or memory or disk, no issue with that. But I had to create these methods. So to be able to use here in this value, for this props value, it only accepts integer number. It doesn't accept float. Okay? So when you go see here, it is value variable integer. And some styling for the card, padding, shadow. And then the front end. Here the front end, our index function, the page index, that I will wrap everything by using reflex vertical stack. I have the button and I kept it in the same side but on the bottom. And I have a heading, and this heading I style it with color scheme. And here the size, instead of giving one number, we have in Reflex breakpoints for responsiveness. So the initial on very small screen, make the font 7, X small 7, small screen 7, medium screen 8, large screen 9. And the class name. Class name is a CSS. class name. And as I told you, core components, as we said before, they are accepting styling that based on Radix UI. So here, this pt-4 is padding. So the padding top for this component will be by 4. Above this component, add 4 measuring padding top. So here in the class name, anything supported by Radix UI, you can add it here as a class name. So this is what we were talking about. You cannot bring Tailwind CSS class names and you use it here. Now it will be conflict because Radix will not understand the class name that you will use it here. So core components, you use only Radix UI class names. And here text, and the text will be populated with the OS flavor that here coming from the variable, and here the method that will load that information. Okay. And after that, another text, breakpoints. And finally, we have another stack here, and all of that inside the VStack. So as we said before, that our data get laid out from top to bottom. Okay. So now the horizontal stack, I'm using the helper function to show the CPU. I'm calling the function with the variable CPU integer and the CPU. Okay. Why? Because here this integer for the progress, if we go up here, set card, the second value or the second parameters, it will go here for the value for the component's progress. Okay. And lastly, we have to add this moment to make sure that we are calling the method from the back end to the front end. So here on a change, and Reflex has another one called onLoad. In other components, you will see that they have a condition here for the event onLoad. Okay. And we are calling the method, the class method here on changing, check every 2 seconds. If there is any changes happen, call again. Okay. And lastly, as I said before, any styling for the main component, like here, vertical stack, the styling comes at the end. Spacing 6, padding 4, align, center. And here we are initializing our app and adding the index page. So let's save this and let's check our app after the auto reload. And here we have our dashboard styled, colored, and also can go light mode or dark mode, and also super responsive, and it does the job. Okay. One last thing to add here before we finish this. If you want to, like when you start developing with Reflex, at some point this will show up on your app. So, or when you going to deploy your app, all you need to do is to come here for looking for rxconfig, and you add this show built with Reflex equal false. So this built with Reflex will not be shown on your web app. Okay. And here we can see the app is retrieving and updating without any kind of refresh or anything. And it is super responsive, and it has this light mode, dark mode. Okay. Before ending, let's explain everything for one more time. Let me open the... Okay, first, we spoke about that we have a backend class state, okay, and its methods, and we have a helper function, okay, and then we have the front end function, or the one that will load or render the page, okay. So how these things to visualize the arranging of these data, okay. So if we come here, any Reflex program will have a user interface and it will have a back end or state, okay. And here user interface or front end. So for the backend state, it will be a class, okay, inherited from rx.state. For the front end, it will be a functions, maybe index, maybe about. So your front end will be inside functions. So the app we created here, I'm containing everything inside a Reflex vertical stack. So it is like I came like that, and this will be my page vertical stack, okay. So the first element will go here, and then here, this one, we already decided where the position of this one. It will be bottom right, first element. So when we go here, it will be in this side. So we are going to have a heading, okay. So the heading will be here. This is the heading. And then we have a text under that heading. It will be here. And another text, and then a horizontal stack. So another text, and we will have a horizontal stack like that. So this horizontal stack, what it will contain. So as you can see that in vertical stack, everything goes from top to down. Here, the horizontal stack will go like that, from left to right. So the horizontal stack, we have a card, 1, 2, 3. 3 cards will be here. And this is our design. So you can visualize your design first, and then writing the code will be very easy using Reflex components. So I hope this thing clear everything when you start using Reflex. And let me know in the comments if there is anything you need to learn more about, or something that you are not able to comprehend. So I will be more than happy to help on that. Okay. So don't forget to check my GitHub repository, because I will upload the source code there if you are interested to take it from there and start building. Maybe you will come up with a complete full system monitoring dashboard for your system, or you are in a data center and you want a complete full system monitoring dashboard, or just to showcase or to get a raise. It's up to you. Okay. So that's Reflex.dev, a powerful new tool for Python developers, making full stack web development way more accessible. If you are curious, I highly recommend giving it a try. And if you have already played with Reflex, drop a comment below. I would love to hear how you are using it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell, because I have got more goodies coming your way soon. See you in the next video, and thanks for watching.